Hey, it's John here. I'm going to talk to you in this video about what to do if you've got a broken sling-back chair. Broken like this one. This one actually the sling has been taken off and partially disassembled. You've got a lot of different repair options. I'm going to primarily dwell on how to convert them into a nice wooden slat back chair. And you know, the wooden slats really isn't anything terribly unique. I mean, you've got Adirondack chairs that have the wooden slats, and or like this nice redwood chair with the narrow slats. But if you have one that's broken like this, you've got several options. You can obviously toss it in the landfill and go out and buy some new ones. And this is a nice swivel, heavy-duty rocker swivel chair. This is probably going to cost you a couple $100 a piece to replace. There are, I know there's at least one company in our area that advertises for about half that. They'll come out and put a new sling in it for you. You can also go online and buy a replacement sling and put it on yourself for probably around $50 or $60 last time I looked. Now the issue that you want to keep in mind if you try to do that yourself, first off, those slings are custom made. They don't keep them in stock for your particular model, and therefore by virtue of the fact that they're custom made, you're going to have to be very precise in the measurements that you give the company to fabricate those slings. The other thing is that they're really kind of a challenge to put in and out, and I think people don't realize is that that fabric is around a metal rod. And as you put that in, take that out of your railings, as you can see on this one, partially done one, you're going to be actually bending that steel rod as you slide that railing up and down. So it's actually quite an ordeal to try to get that sling replaced in there. Another more drastic option is you could actually go out and actually buy the fabric to sew your own sling replacement. So that's very, very cheap. But two things to keep in mind there is one is you need the skill of sewing, which I lack. And you also need a heavy-duty sewing machine because that fabric, as it's doubled and tripled and quadrupled over at these seams, it becomes really, really thick and is difficult to sew through. So what I'm going to do on this video is I am going to jump right to the key issue on doing the conversion and then follow that up with some suggestions at the end, some helpful suggestions as to how you might want to do the project. So the real key issue you're going to have on doing this conversion is how are you going to bolt these wooden slats to this metal railing. And if you try to just use a regular traditional hex nut as you slide these railings on, well, that hex nut is just going to spin around and you're not going to be able to tighten it without some kind of special magic. One option you have is something called a cross dowel nut. These are used in IKEA type furniture, and people apparently lose a lot of them because they're readily available in Home Depot. And you can see that you could slide this in and then tighten it up, and it wouldn't spin around in there. And then a problem I have is that they're only available in 1/4 inch size, and 1/4 inch bolts are too big to fit inside my groove. So another option is something called square nuts. Now these are actually for an even smaller bolt than I'm using. I'm using number 8 type bolts. These square nuts are for size 10. And the idea would be is that you would attach that, and if you can get the square nuts in a size big enough that they don't spin around in there, then that's an option for you. So actually one of the first things you need to do is take your railing down to your hardware store or whatever and just find out, you know, what is the largest size bolt that I can readily fit through this channel, and then see what kind of nuts are available for it. Now what I actually ended up doing was using something called a speed nut. Sometimes these are called spring nuts, and they're made out of spring metal, and really very surprisingly strong. They're using a lot of fabrication, shelving, automotive type situations. And this size, I kind of like this one in particular because, as you can see, it's got a narrow side that readily slides up the channel, and then obviously has a length that's clearly not going to spin around inside that channel. The specific ones that I ended up using are these Everbuilt Speed Nuts number 8-32. I got these at Home Depot. You may have a little bit of an issue, is that I had trouble trying to find them in bulk, and I ended up having to go to 2 or 3 different Home Depots to get enough of them. Now, if you're running around looking for them and you see some with just the number 8 without the dash 32 designation, the dash 32 is your pitch. So the ones without the dash 32, these ones are actually for sheet metal screws, and you want to really avoid these because they will not work on your threaded bolts. That'll just tear up your threaded bolts. Another thing that you will want to find out fairly quickly is what length of a bolt do you need to be able to, that's long enough to attach and get that bolt, the nut inside your railing, but yet is not so long that it bottoms out on your railing and you can't tighten it down all the way. So, you're probably looking at something lengthwise as an inch or inch and a quarter. And in that, also take into consideration whether you are recessing the bolts, as I did here with a little countersink, or whether the bolts are going to sit up on top of the board. That'll add just a hair of difference to your length. And then if you happen to find yourself in a situation where it looks like you're kind of in between sizes, that an inch and a quarter is just a bit too long and an inch is going to be a bit too short, you can always get that longer bolt and then just space it up with a washer or two so that it doesn't bottom out when you try to attach it. You do want to have some a little bit of movement on this, so that as you slide these, you put these railings on with the bolt and you slide them up. You don't want it so tight that it's difficult to slide the slats up, so keeping that in mind. You want really kind of, I would say, the longest bolt that you can use and still be able to fully tighten it. So I'm not going to go step by step on the entire assembly process. I think a lot of it you can figure out, but as you can tell from my stack of slats here, there really is a lot of work attaching all these slats, and so this is where I'm going to call in some help. We got our first chair done. Well, Henry, how is it? Good. Hi, so here's some suggestions and ideas to help you as you do your sling-back chair conversion, and really your opportunity to learn from my mistakes. First off, as you get that first top piece attached, I think it's a good idea to get your right angle out there and just make sure that it's at a good nice right angle, and that you got the first one correctly in position. And while I'm here, let me also mention one other thing I did was I took a router and I smoothed off the top, and I'm going to do that at the bottom one as well, just to give it a little bit additional comfort rather than a bit of a sharp edge on the boards otherwise. A couple of things that you should do before you even start putting on any of the slats is first get one of your bolts and run it all the way up and down through your railing groove to make sure that there's not any tight spots that are going to hang up the screws as you try to slide those slats on. I found a couple of tight spots. For whatever reason, the railing was pinched in narrower, and I just got a pry bar out and just widen them to be consistent with the rest of the width of the railing. And also make sure that those railings are absolutely as parallel as possible, because you want to take one measurement on the width. So as you drill the holes for your bolts, you want to be using a consistent measurement throughout the chair. And if the railings bend in and out, that's really going to present some issues. Now, if you do have, for example, that the railings are need to be aligned or corrected a little bit to get them parallel, what you can simply do is just get maybe a washer or two. And for example, if you need to pinch this railing in here a little bit, you just slide a washer in there, as I did before you bolt it on, and that'll give you the little bit of flexibility you may need to adjust those widths. So as you're putting the slats onto the chair, you want to make sure that they're nice and even with each other, not like this one. And the way I did that is I made a little template out of a piece of scrap wood that I could hold up here and get it in position. And I can't do it with only one hand, but since I'm holding the camera, but then I just slide the other slat on, hold it, make sure they're nice, evenly spaced in there, and then use the screwdriver to get it tightened in place. So if you're not familiar with using speed nuts and you've decided to go the route of using these, you should be aware that there really is a wrong way and a right way to attach them onto the bolt. Otherwise, they're not going to tighten down as tightly as you would hope. Basically, the easiest thing to think about the speed nut is the fact that it's kind of like a washer and a nut. And the washer is basically this the side that has the hole without the threading. That needs to go onto the bolt first. Here we go, there's our bolt. And then the part with the threads is on the top. And if you put it on that way, give it a couple of twists before you slide it onto the chair, it'll tighten down really nicely. But if you put them on backwards and you try to tighten them down, you hear a click click, and they just really will not tighten down. Another thing to keep in mind as you're doing your chair conversion is you will want to do some measurement as to how many slats that you need to do, how you're going to space them, and what's actually going to fit on your railings. As you can see, when I got to the end here, I've got the end of my railing right here, and if I would have continued to use 1x2 slats, I would have had just a little bit of that railing here left over, and probably not enough of it to attach yet another slat. So what I did was, instead of using these 1x2s, I switched to a 1x3, and that just gave me that little bit of additional length to cover the railing down here at the end. And so it kind of actually, I think, artistically turned out pretty nice. And it kind of looks like I've got a header board up there, and similarly down here at the base. So at the beginning of the video, I talked about some of the costs associated with traditional repairs of sling-back chairs. I guess the question is, how much did it actually cost me to repair these chairs? And it turned out to be about $55 per chair. Now, that does not include the cost of the paint, since the chairs needed paint anyway, and or the cost of the trip to the ice cream store for my assistant. But the cost is really, first off, you can imagine the cost of the wood. Now, I used some really nice redwood, and ran about $7 per 8-foot board, and so that was about $28 per chair. I've seen some cedar and some pine that would have driven the cost way down on that. I use these black powder-coated bolts, which ran about $6 per chair. I could have gone with the stainless steel for about $3 a chair if I wanted to. But really the expensive thing, probably that's surprisingly expensive, was the speed nuts that I used. And I didn't really take the time to shop around to buy them in bulk. I bought them in little 2-packs at Home Depot, and each 2-pack cost me about 90 cents, and I used about 40 of them per chair, so that worked out to be roughly $20 on the speed nuts. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, let me know. I am thinking about doing my next video on the conversion of your kids' or grandkids' Fisher-Price toy into the Deathmobile from Animal House. Bye.